Hey guys, I want to put out a quick little video here on some bills that are coming up, actually being forced through next week in Congress. H.R. 8 and H.R. 1446. H.R. 8 is essentially the elimination of private gun sales without having to pay an FFL in order to transfer those guns. And it is a two-way transfer. It would essentially be me transferring a gun to an FFL in order to sell to you, and then that transfer has to take place from that FFL back to you. In other words, I can't transfer straight to you. The FFL has to be involved. So it's two transfers essentially is what it boils down to. The other one is HR 1446. 1446 is essentially, it opens the door for a perpetual loop, if you will, that you can get caught into. In other words, right now we have delays. If you're delayed on an 4473, whenever that background check is called in to the NICS system, you can be delayed up to 3 days. And if the ATF, the NICS system, FBI, and all those guys haven't gotten back to you and either denied you or cleared you after 3 days, there's an automatic clearing that takes place and you're able to go up and pick that firearm up. The only way you're delayed is if they actually delay you. They actually have to do their job. This way, they don't have to do their job. They can be even more lax. Now, we're talking about federal workers here. Imagine giving a green light to a federal worker to be more lazy than what they already are. But we're going to open the door to allow them to just haphazardly approve or deny you whenever they want, and there's no sunset on that. So like the 3-day window that if they haven't gotten back to you now, the firearm is released into your custody, that's not going to take place. There will be no automatic release of that firearm. So if they haven't gotten around to their job in 20 or 30 days, you essentially go right back in again and have to reapply because that 4473 is no longer good. 4473's background checks are good for 30 days. So once you go past that, you are out of the loop and you have to purposely put yourself back in the loop. That's HR 1446. True to form with Joe Biden, they're trying to ram those through. There are many, many co-sponsors of these two bills that got introduced this week. They're not going to committee. They're going to go to the floor to vote next week. And there are Republicans that are behind this also. So more on that later. But what I want to do is I want to put together somewhat of a concerted effort of us pro-Second Amendment people. What I mean by that is I don't think we have time for letters, obviously, snail mail. I don't think email is going to work because we have a weekend involved. And of course, politicians are going to be out. They work less than Santa Claus does. So I feel like phone calls are the only way we're going to get anything done. Now, the frontline workers are the ones doing all the real work, the people answering the phones. I don't care if they're Democrat or Republican. They're the ones who do the real work. The politicians are out all the time. They're just playing and doing their thing. So we have to engage those frontline workers. Those frontline workers keep a tally of who's calling, what districts they're in, if you're a senator or something like that, what part of the state, what the topic is. Was it a healthcare related issue? Is it a Second Amendment related issue? Is it an immigration issue? They keep a tally of all that. Then they also keep a tally of a thumbs up or thumbs down, and they will make notes if there are personal things that you can include in that conversation. Now, I'm going to post links in the description below as to who your representative is and who your senator is. So you can go find them, contact them, call the phone number that's listed there. But one of the first things that I want to explain to you that you really need to do, find out when their reelection is. As I've stated before in other videos, nothing scares a politician more than taking that free cheese, that government cheese, from them. They don't fear death. They don't fear the coronavirus. They don't fear any kind of virus. They don't fear jumping out of airplanes. They don't fear death. What they do fear is you taking the legal insider trading from them, the laws that they pass that do not apply to them or their family members, the get out of jail free card that they possess along with all their family members. The law does not apply to them. Let's make no mistake about it. They sit on their high horses all the time and talk about that, but the law truly does not apply to them. That's what they fear. They fear getting out of that loop. That's their biggest fear. They fear nothing else. Those of you out there that sit there and say, oh, you know, the voting process is compromised. Maybe it is. But it doesn't mean that we throw everything away and eliminate and try to abandon all efforts to make any kind of a difference. We at least still have that. We at least still have our own voices that we can take to them. So don't abandon anything because you've lost confidence in the system. If nothing else, push that much harder to where they cannot ignore us. But tell them when you speak to them, I know when you're reelected. Name what year it is. And I'm going to tell you right now, especially these Republicans, a Republican will vote for an anti-gun bill right now. if he's not up for re-election sometime down the road. Marco Rubio is notorious for this. When he's not up for re-election, like if it's say, I don't know, 4 years away, 2 years away even, this guy will vote on all the anti-gun bills. He'll put up his red flag gun law, which is a super, super anti-constitutional bill. But these guys will do that. As they get closer to their election year, then they start following what they're supposed to do and listening to their constituents. So don't fall for that. If it's a senator you're talking to, because there's a very good chance this bill makes it to the Senate, because it will probably most likely pass in the House, unfortunately. If you have a senator that's being elected in the next year or so, you need to put some pressure on him, because that's the kind of guy that will vote your way, because he is so close to re-election. But they think you're stupid if they're 4 years out or even 6 years out. What they're going to do is vote how they want to and ignore their constituents, thinking that you're too stupid to remember. And in many cases, let's face it and let's be honest, the voting public is pretty stupid. A lot of the voting public will have forgotten by the time that election comes around in 4 or 6 years. So we got to put pressure on them to let them know, I know when you get reelected, and I'm going to remember this. In fact, I'm taking notes. Let them know you got a file in your phone with their name on it to take notes of what they've done. I'm not going to forget. I may forget today, but I'm going to remember by the time I pull that lever. Now, mention specifically H.R. 8 and H.R. 1446. That's the ones they're trying to fast track through. Mention them specifically and then go into some detail about them. What I'm going to do, guys, just real quick before I move on to this, I'm going to list a lot of these bullet pointed questions and things to kind of remember when you talk to them in the description down below in YouTube. Copy, paste it, email it to yourself, text it to yourself, print it out, whatever you got to do so you've got it handy when you talk to that person on the phone. Again, you're probably not going to talk to the politician, but when you talk to somebody, make sure you've got it handy, because they're going to try to give you politispeak back and tell you some things and throw you off. Have your notes in front of you, that way you're prepared. The first one is H.R. 8. Ask them how they plan to vote on H.R. 8. Are you going to vote for it or are you going to vote against it? And be specific. If they say, I'm not sure how I'm going to vote, just call them out on that. Say, no, you know how you're going to vote. Especially if they're a co-sponsor. If they're a co-sponsor of it, tell them you already know how they're going to vote. Ask them specifically on H.R. 8, if you're trying to outlaw private gun sales between two friends, how is that going to save any lives? And specifically tell them, okay, guys, we are law-abiding citizens. We operate somewhat in a bubble, meaning the criminals are outside the bubble, law-abiding Americans are inside the bubble. We sell guns to each other. We don't sell outside the bubble. If we sold outside the bubble, we'd be outside the bubble. We would be criminals at that point, not inside the bubble. So we don't break that seal. If you know somebody's a criminal, you simply don't sell them the gun, right? Because that makes you a criminal. And now you're not one of us. You're outside, not inside. The criminals on the outside of the bubble are who are selling to each other. So ask them, how do you think you're stopping anything? Because all you're doing is affecting every single person inside that bubble, and everybody else out on the outside of that bubble is still doing the same thing. At some point, you have to assume that a good person is selling to a bad person. Well, if that's the case, they weren't a good person to begin with. They were a criminal. So you weren't going to stop that sale to begin with. If they give you the answer that they all like to give, that it's going to keep guns out of the hands of criminals, ask them to explain how that is going to happen based on what I just explained. Ask them how that affects that. Explain to me how that's even an issue. Ask them who they think will be more negatively affected, an honest law-abiding citizen or a criminal. Honest law-abiding citizen, we're law-abiding because we, get this, abide by the law. Crazy thought, right? On 1446. Ask them how they think that is going to save any lives. When they tell you, as long as it keeps the guns out of people who shouldn't be having guns, call them on it. Tell them BS. Tell them, you know what it's going to do? It's going to cost lives. Folks, these bills are trying to be fast-tracked through. We have got to push some buttons on telephones right now. We've got to do that, guys. I think that we as a gun community can make enough noise out there and threaten these people with their jobs. Yes, I use the word threaten. Threaten these people with their jobs. Let them know, I will vote you out if you do not listen to your constituents. This goes for Republicans and Democrats. This is not a party thing. We need to let these people know that we are watching them.